Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and a happy new year to all of you out there. We are looking forward to the final week. Hard to believe already. We wait for this all year long, and we're already in the final week of the 2024-2025 NFL regular season. Week 18, the Pittsburgh Steelers closing out the season at home with the visiting Cincinnati Bengals, an 8-8 Cincinnati Bengals team visiting the 10-6 Pittsburgh Steelers, the Cincinnati Bengals. So many storylines to this game, obviously. HBO, Hard Knocks, they're getting their money's worth. The league scheduling this game for everyone nationally on ABC and ESPN, locally WTAE in Pittsburgh, 8 o'clock kickoff with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman on the call. And this is a must-win for the Cincinnati Bengals, but I would argue it's a must-win for the Pittsburgh Steelers as well, as we know they're on a 3-game skid, looking to snap that streak, gain some momentum, and not go into the postseason wherever they may land with a 4-game losing streak. That's definitely not something that we want to see. So the Steelers are going to have to right this ship, and they're going to have to do it against a division opponent who does need some help. The Bengals, it's not so easy as win and they're in, but that's probably why these games kind of went a little awkwardly, I think, on Saturday. The Steelers will know part of their destiny before they even kick off at 8 o'clock Eastern, because the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns, they're going to be facing off at 4 o'clock in the early window of the doubleheader for ABC/ESPN. So they'll host the Cleveland Browns, who aren't really trying to put up a fight and are inching closer to having the top pick in the NFL draft. And I think they're just kind of in tank mode, but stranger things have happened. Should the Baltimore Ravens end up winning the game, they win the AFC North, they will host a home playoff game, but it depends on who they actually who they actually face here. Because if the Steelers were to lose against the Cincinnati Bengals, and try not to make this confusing, right? So if we go into 8 o'clock and the Ravens beat the Browns, there's two outcomes to this. You got the Steelers winning the game and traveling to Houston to face the Texans, or they lose the game and the Chargers defeat the Vegas Raiders. Then it's going to be the Steelers in a rematch going to Baltimore for the wild card round. Whereas if the Steelers and Ravens both win, or if the Steelers and the Chargers both lose, also unlikely, Chargers losing to the Raiders, then the Steelers visit the Houston Texans. So once again, Ravens beat the Browns. The Steelers can either go to Houston or go to Baltimore. If the Steelers lose to the Bengals on Saturday, you have a Ravens win, Steelers loss, Chargers win. It's going to be the Steelers going to the Ravens. If it's pretty much anything else with the Ravens win, it's going to be the Steelers at the Houston Texans as the 5 seed. But should the Cleveland Browns do the unthinkable, the Ravens just try and sit some players and I don't see that. Harbaugh is going to be out there. John Harbaugh is going to be coaching this team up to host a home playoff game. So, but if the unthinkable does happen and the Cleveland Browns come out and they say, we're going to play spoiler, and they end up defeating the Baltimore Ravens, then the Steelers have a chance to win the AFC North and host the LA Chargers. An unlikely situation, an unlikely scenario, but we've seen stranger things happen, especially with the college football playoff. Wow. If there was ever like a case for we needed these games on New Year's Day, except instead of all of these wacky bowl games that have been going on for a while, this was the case. Man, I'll tell you what, every one of those games, fantastic. And, thoughts and prayers, of course, to everything else that happened, in New Orleans and otherwise just yesterday too. And maybe we'll get to this Notre Dame game that had to be postponed. So obviously on my mind, I hope all of yous had a safe and happy holiday season. Otherwise, still a little festive here through the end of the week as I still finish up celebrating. I feel like I'm in that Four Christmases movie where I'm moving around everywhere, and nothing would be a better gift than to get a home playoff game, but the Steelers kind of squandered that already. It's the reason why the Bengals enter Acrisure Stadium at a 1.5 point favorite. Steelers minus one, or I should say Bengals minus 1.5. Steelers getting the points in this game, a 48 over under, which is far more than their first matchup. But I think some of the bookies lost some money on the last one. This is when the Steelers defense started to concede a lot of yardage, a lot of points, and they've done so in, 4 of the last 5 games. They've got to correct this, get some momentum. But again, when you're playing 3 games in 11 days and it's against some of the best teams that the National Football League has to offer, the Philadelphia Eagles, close to the top of the NFC. I'd say they're the 3rd team just because we know it's going to come down to it. It's crazy as it is with the Vikings and the Lions. They're going to play the Sunday night game for all the marbles there in the NFC North, and there's going to be a 14-win team. They're both 14-2. Somebody's going to lose this game and have 14 wins and be a wild card and have to travel on the road for the playoffs. So, we talk about the Steelers being the top wild card seed, but, more than likely because of the loss, the couple losses that they had. If they could have beat the Chiefs, it would have happened. If they could have beat the Ravens, definitely would have happened that they won the AFC North and got a home playoff game. But they're not the only ones in this kind of boat when you look around the league. But at 3 games in 11 days, didn't do a lot for their health. There's guys they couldn't get on the field. 2 of those games without Deshaun Elliott. Trying to think who else was missing on this. Guys in the secondary, like Dante Jackson was hurt, and then Joey Porter got lost in that game. The good news is when we take a look at the Pittsburgh Steelers injury report. Now, we don't have one for the Cincinnati Bengals. For whatever reason, it's not reported on either of the team's websites. I don't know if they're practicing or what. But the Steelers on a mini bye are getting a lot of people back, and there's some other players that are having their practice activation window opened, so they may be available for postseason play. I was actually hopeful, and I was quite surprised by this list, that some of these players may even be available for Saturday's game. You talk about making adjustments. We'll flip back to me here for a second. Talk about making adjustments. Mike Tomlin, necessary adjustments. I look at this list. I look at the healthy players and who are maybe somewhat healthy players or players trying to return. And maybe this is the Steelers might get a chance to actually reload. They've had a little bit of extra rest. The Bengals didn't have as big of a break here. Got to go Saturday to Saturday. The Steelers go Wednesday to Saturday. They didn't give them the Sunday deal. And the same thing with the Ravens, obviously. So they had the teams that were wearing the Christmas patches and doing the Saturday before and then the Wednesday Christmas Day games. It's all Hard Knocks influence, and so they could get them all together. It was all kind of pre-planned. Like, again, usually they don't have games go off earlier in other games for competitive balance reasons, because then people are going to say, well, the Steelers are the 5 seed. So what do they have to play for, actually? They could sit players, rest players. I don't think that's Mike Tomlin's style. I don't think that's the Steelers' style. I don't think they want to lose another game. Personally, I don't know. If they go back into Baltimore, I'd much rather go back there after winning a wild card game. If that would be the situation, I'd have to look at the brackets, and then, of course, we see who wins and loses to see that. But the Steelers as a 5 seed, I think, would go to Baltimore if Baltimore wins their wild card game. Baltimore is going to be the lowest of the other division winners because the Steelers would have beaten the Texans. And then it gets interesting. I think the Steelers are, Russell Wilson fumble away from competing in that game. It's a pretty big swing. I know the score doesn't indicate, but they also didn't have everybody that they needed on the field at that point. I think you get some hungry guys like Deshaun Elliott out there, and you look at some of the other players you could throw out here. I mean, he gets used in packages, and it's kind of a gimmick, but Justin Fields being a full participant, that's exciting if they need to get a small spark in the offense. No, that doesn't mean benching Russell Wilson, who got some days of rest here, right? So on Tuesday, with the kind of abnormal schedule here, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Russell Wilson, a resting veteran. You've got Roman Wilson, the rookie, with the 4.2 speed, very Kelvin Austin-like, but a more physical kind of build and body. We have not gotten to see hardly anything. He's dressed for like a game, maybe 2 earlier in the year. Maybe this is some reinforcements that could help the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver group. And Ben Skoranek is becoming a fan favorite already. I like him already. He had the hip injury, limited, and then full on Wednesday. So Skoranek, special teams demon, been making some plays. Makes you wonder, like, how some of these guys slip through the cracks, or just the systems that they end up in that precludes to this kind of play, right? And then you've got Joey Porter Jr., who is a full participant with the knee. Man, I'll tell you what, that was scary. It's a scary thought. If you ever have to go back and have nightmares of what it was like to not have a lockdown corner in Pittsburgh, go back to before Joe Hayden. Go back to the Valentino, Antoine Blake days, right? And Bryce McCain. And, oh, man, just that whole stretch. There's guys I'm forgetting. Cortez Allen. They tried like a whole cycle of guys in and out, and just didn't work out. So Jaylen Warren with his ribs was a full participant. And then we start getting into where it gets interesting. Brian was going to join me today, but unfortunately he's not here. I got to take a swig of coffee, unfortunately, with no backup vocals. Luckily, my vocals are working pretty decent today. But here we go. We've got Cole Holcomb, who we talked about. Could he pop up at the end of the season? And being limited 2 days doesn't really tell me, after the knee injury that he had, that he's going to be full go. But if there ever was a game where people were talking about, I think the Steelers, I mean, they're going to want to win this game. Then they can go to Houston. They're going to play in good weather. They're in a dome. I think that's probably the preferred opponent that they would have. I'm not really worried about the Chargers. A rematch game and the Chargers being a little hot, but they still have a lot of cracks in their armor. The Chargers do, right? Not to say that the Steelers don't. They got their own problems we're going to talk about. And obviously, with over this 3-game win streak, the offense has been an issue, but defense has too. And if you can have another season, this guy was the green dot. This guy was a team captain last season, Cole Holcomb. You had him into this mix. He was the prized free agent. He was the Patrick Queen for 2023 among the inside linebackers. And you put him next to Patrick Queen, well, they could maybe afford to in this game. This might be one you could test him a little bit. This isn't a must win. This isn't like the Steelers lose and they're out of the playoffs. It's just jockeying for who they play. And I don't know that they're afraid to play the Ravens again. I would just prefer that they would go into Baltimore, perhaps. Let's say they beat the Bengals on Saturday. Then they go and they play the Houston Texans in Houston and beat them there. You've now got 2 games of momentum. Maybe you've got a defense that's back to allowing about 16, 18 points per game, under 20, with an offense that's doing better than that. That's confidence. That's momentum. And you go into Baltimore and think, man, this was a fluke. We didn't have all of our guys the last time. I know it's a tall tale, but Baltimore isn't unbeatable. The Steelers have done it once already this year. It's a tough place to go and play. I would just rather do it. Because, I mean, like, you look at the alternative, right? They lose to Cincinnati Saturday and then go into M&T Bank Stadium on a 4-game losing streak. It's a whole different mentality, right? Just think about it from the human aspect. You've got to psych yourself up to, can we do this? And if that game starts out where you have a turnover or a 3 and out, and then the defense gives up like a 70-yard drive in like the first or second series, you're like, here we go again. And it's just not the same mental aspect of if you punch 2 teams in the mouth and you go into the divisional playoffs and it's going to be another AFC North clash and you get a rematch and you said, we beat these guys once and the last one was a fluke, and you come out and you do good things and you force a 3 and out. It's a whole different script. You could just think about it. Like, even as a fan, you know how this weighs in. I see what some of yous out there comment on our YouTube channel and out on Twitter and Facebook and social media. It wears on you too. We're hungry for a playoff win. It's been a while. I know people say Tomlin's had all these talented teams. It's one of the healthier streaks I can remember the Steelers having in a long time. But when you're playing the volume of games against the physical opponents that they've had in that 11-day streak, you're just like, in all the divisional games at the end, you're just like, oh no, here we go again, right? But anyways, Cole Holcomb, man, I'll tell you, if they could get him back on the roster and get his feet wet, I mean, this is a game, like, again, that it's only going to cost them who their opponent is. So this might be one to get him up to speed. Now, Logan Lee, I don't know. I was very surprised to see him on there too. And it's, again, one of these activation win things. window things. I don't know that he'll actually get out there and play this season, but you never know. Isaac Sambalu, still on this injury report. I'm kind of laughing. Full participant. He had a day of rest. Dante Jackson shows up, though. He's the newest one. He's been dealing with some back problems throughout. Now, Dante has been a scapegoat here or there. We've heard a lot of the Steelers players, defenders, talking about guys got to do their job. Everybody's got to do their job. And Brian and I were discussing as to whether or not that meant one individual in its entirety, or maybe one individual, but different individuals depending on the play and the communication breakdowns and who that might be. Was that Cam Sutton because he just came in and they've been asking a lot of him and moving him around a lot more than Beanie Bishop was? And maybe the change just wasn't good. I know Cam Sutton's a fine player, but we got to discuss. He was there in camp and then missed 8 games. And there's just some continuity. I wonder about that with Cole Holcomb too, but they're already doing somewhat of a rotation. Maybe we see more of Peyton Wilson. I think we do against Joe Burrow and this Bengals offense. Holy cow, man. The Bengals, I'm not going to lie, I'm an AFC North brat. When I draft my fantasy teams, I've got Joe Burrow. I've got T. Higgins. I even have Derrick Henry. Like, these are the guys that I know intimately from covering the Pittsburgh Steelers and observing the AFC North under a magnifying glass. Now, every now and then I'll say something that might be a mistake. No, I don't. I'm never wrong. But they're just tearing it up. And Jamar Chase is out here doing Jerry Rice and Randy Moss type stuff. And Joe Burrow's doing Dan Marino type stuff. 42 touchdowns this year to 8 interceptions. He has been sacked 44 times. Hey, when you get that when you've already had 16 games in a season. He's had 2 game-winning drives and a fourth quarter comeback, so it hasn't been as good as it can be, but they're in it. It's the defense. It's usually the problem here for the Bengals, and they've been playing a little bit better. They've also had some opponents that they've been able to get right with. Since they've lost to the Steelers, they've won 4 in a row. Now they're almost out of this. The first 500-plus team that they defeated last Saturday, was the Denver Broncos. 30-24 in an overtime thriller. And that's why I got all 40-plus fantasy points for my championship out of Burrow and T. Higgins. You know, I'm bragging about that, but I'm also sitting there like, man, Broncos are a quality defense. Quality defensive coordinator, quality players, Patrick Surtain, all the way down the line. But they've had close calls. They beat the Cowboys by 7. Tennessee Titans put up 27 points on that defense. The Browns, they didn't do much of anything. You've got a combo of Jameis Winston, Dorian Thompson, Robinson. That team just feels like they've given up. Whereas the Bengals are trying not to give up. Losing to the Steelers should have been it. They should be out of the postseason. They need some extra help. What they need to have happen is they need a win against the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously. And then they need losses by both Denver and Miami to clinch a playoff spot for the 3rd time in the past 4 seasons. I mean, Joe Burrow probably playing MVP type football if he were on any like other team, and actually it may even be in consideration if they squeak in at 9-8. Score, 4,641 yards. The Steelers going to be lucky to limit him to under 5,000 for the season. He has 606 pass attempts. I think that might be a season record. This is like the Ben Roethlisberger era of just throwing his arm off with Randy Fichtner. And now some of that, too, is also Burrow not being able to complete full seasons. 0606 ties his previous. Now, he's in the Pro Bowl, as is Lamar Jackson. 4 Steelers make it. A slew of Philadelphia Eagles, including 3 offensive linemen, make it. A bunch of Chiefs are in there. So, you know, these are the type of teams the Steelers have been playing against. Steelers, I should mention, Pro Bowl All-Starters. TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Chris Boswell, Minka Fitzpatrick. No particular order. It's just how I remembered it off the top of my head. But Burrow is he's been on fire. He's completing almost 70% of his passes. It's actually 69.8, which is nice. He could be had. He could be gotten to. It's going to be the biggest deal when you get to the game on Saturday. Steelers going to have to bring pressure. They showed less of a reliance to blitz throughout the year. They were bringing some more of that. They were trying to with Patrick Mahomes. The team was just gassed. but they were able to get to Burrow 4 times. That game in Cincinnati, a 44-38 thriller. Burrow was 28 of 38, 73.6% of his passes for 309, 3 touchdowns, the 1 interception. They, Pittsburgh Steelers got to limit Jamar Chase. Good to have Joey Porter back. They got to limit T. Higgins. You got to watch out for Mike Gesicki. Chase Brown, the running back, though, we don't have an injury report. He got hurt in last Saturday's game and did not look good. It almost looked like something that was like, this guy's going to miss this week, if not the rest of the season, which I know is just this week, but even into postseason. They traded for Khalil Herbert as a backup from Chicago. He has some ball security issues here or there. He could still hit the hole pretty quick. Can hit the edge. They're going to try and keep these edge rushers off of Burrow, which isn't always easy to do when you're talking about TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig. But I think if you have the full complement of the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, I'm just going to watch where Herbert, or if it's Brown, where they go. I really felt like the Bengals was the first team that started doing this. Talked about this on the last show with Brian, where rolling out the running back, going empty, and sending him all the way down to, the sidelines, the far edge, to try and take Queen out of the picture, out of the middle of the field. And then you might have some man, maybe some loose zone type concepts from the Steelers trying to guard like Jamar Chase, because you're not going to do this with James Pierre or Corey Trice. You're not going to press on the line of scrimmage. You might with Joey, and Joey's going to get handsy, and Joey got a bunch of flags in that last game. And both of these guys, Higgins and Chase, are a handful. They are more than a handful, to be completely honest. This is maybe the best. I'm trying to think of another duo. I mean, the Vikings have Jefferson and Addison that are, pretty great too, but they're up there. If they're not top 5, they're top 3. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins as far as top wide receiver rooms in the National Football League. Chase has 16 of those 42 touchdowns that Joe Burrow's thrown. T. Higgins has 10 of them. Gesicki is kind of a guy that's not the red zone target. You get Yosavash, who operates a little more out of the slot as like a Tyler Boyd. He has 34 catches, almost 500 yards on the season. He has a 13.7 average yards per reception, which those are bigger plays. Chase has 13.8. So they spread the ball around. Higgins doesn't have 1,000 yards yet, but he does have 10 touchdowns on the season. Chase Brown has been used in the past game. In the past, he has 54 receptions, 360 yards, 4 touchdowns. Those are pretty respectable numbers. I know some of that was a little split. They had Zach Moss that they had signed to replace Joe Mixon for this season, but Moss, once again, hurt. Talented player. Unfortunately, that guy can't just stay healthy, unfortunately. So maybe fortunately for the Steelers, who entered their 21st consecutive season without a losing record. I know everybody's going to talk about that. That's why this win is imperative. I think they could do the same things. I think that they could do the same things they did when they were in Cincinnati. If you remember, there were just these little hitch routes with Jalen Warren, Najee Harris. You just put them like in, it looked like they were in pass pro. And then they would just whiz right over one of the A gaps next to Zach Frazier, come right out the middle, turn right around, and boom, there's nobody there. The linebackers for Cincinnati, I've been watching their games casually, somewhat. Obviously, I was a little more tuned in and inclined to watch and see that overtime game with the Broncos. They're covering that a little bit better. The Broncos, though, still Bo Nix, still rookie quarterback. They didn't quite have the same, and I'm trying to think, Javonte Williams wasn't the big impact in that game, but they got guys like Jaleel McLaughlin. I don't remember him having any impact if he was even there. They had the other guy that's a rookie too, and they just didn't seem to utilize their backs enough in the pass game. Even with a rookie quarterback, you would think it's just a little dump off. I'm taking that cheese every time I can if I'm the Steelers. I also thought that would actually work. It should have worked against the Kansas City Chiefs for sure, if not also the Baltimore Ravens. I thought that was ripe for the picking. Against the Eagles, Bond, another Pro Bowler, inside linebacker. That guy another guy making the Pro Bowl. Just talented guys, talented teams the Steelers have played against. Even though they've had losses, I believe it's one of those things like where they limped into the 6th seed. You're like, just look at how strong this schedule is. Just look at the teams that they played back then and what that does, the iron sharpening iron type aspect of the National Football League. I do believe that makes the Steelers a better team than maybe some teams are giving credit for. But you can't have the self-defeating mistakes. They have not been forcing turnovers of their opponents. That's going to be a big critical factor here as Burrow gets rid of the ball wisely, safely. You're going to have to sack this guy, and you're going to have to cover enough. It's going to be a bend but don't break, but you got to cover just enough to make sure they don't move the chains, and you got to cover enough, not just the big plays, but to make him hold the ball a little bit longer, to make him a little more uncomfortable, to make him make other decisions with the football. Maybe easier said than done, but I think a whole hell of a lot of that falls on more than the Steelers' defense. I think it falls on the Steelers' offense that has been missing in action for the last 3 games. You take a look at what the Steelers have or haven't done. I mean, they had 44 points against the Bengals, and then since then, 27 against the Browns, and then on the 3-game losing streak, 13, 17, and 10. That stinks. And they've turned the ball over 5 times over the course of those games. I mean, they had games earlier in the year where the offense didn't turn the ball over at all. They did force 2 turnovers against Philadelphia. They actually were in the +1 in that game. But in the minus department against the Ravens and the Chiefs, can't have to protect the football. That goes for everybody from Russell Wilson. Everybody's got to do their job, right? But George Pickens should be back 100%. Don't know if he was 100% against Kansas City. I don't know if Roman Wilson does anything. Mike Tomlin is just, even if that dude was healthy for the entire season, Mike Tomlin is just a different guy when it comes to rookie wide receivers. But he might not be seeing what he needs to see with Mike Williams. You get Ben Skoranek, who's been sneaky. He's a bigger target. He's like 6'3", lanky guy. I kind of like it. I mean, when you're talking about a 3rd or a 4th wide receiver on the field, this might open up some stuff for Calvin Austin too. They've been trying to hit Calvin Austin. He hasn't put up the numbers enough to say he's had a breakout season, but I just feel like he's just so on the cusp. The Steelers' offenses in the previous years under Matt Canada were just so bad that even what Calvin Austin has done this season, which isn't a whole lot, right? 36 receptions, 548 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He's just edging right behind Freiermuth when it comes to yardage and touchdowns. Freiermuth has 20 more yards, but on 21 more receptions. But he's moving the chains on some short yardage stuff, right? He has 57 for 568 and 6 touchdowns. You've got guys like Jaylen Warren who can catch the ball in the backfield, but Pickens is close. He's 100 yards off of a 1,000-yard season. Oddly enough, it's hard to believe he only has 3 touchdown catches this year. So Austin and Freiermuth actually have more. Now, I know Pickens has missed some time, and he's going to be a favorite target for Wilson to maybe hit the ball down the field. In order for that to happen, you have to have the run game. You have to have something that helps support sucking the safeties up in the box and getting some favorable one-on-one matchups by successfully running the football and getting behind against other teams like the Chiefs or the Ravens. That doesn't preclude what the Steelers' offense is built to do, because you're now trying to pass the football and get into a shootout. And when you take a look at the Steelers' offense over the last few games, okay, they had 2 of 2 against the Chiefs. It's what they wanted to do, but they just didn't get it as successfully there. They were throwing the ball a lot more against the Ravens and even the Eagles. They get behind. They only had 56 rushing yards, 107 pass yards. They didn't even have the football in that game. That's why I think it'll work, but they haven't, like, you haven't seen a lot of 200-plus yard pass games, but when you have, you've seen the points against both New York teams. Against the Commanders was only 172, but they had 140 rushing. The first time against the Ravens, 122. The Browns, 120. The Bengals, the first time, 110, and they were able to throw 410 yards and just match blow for blow. So I think Najee Harris, and I know Warren's been getting a little more of the call there. Warren, he's got spring to his step, but there's nothing to sneeze on when it comes to Najee Harris. Another 1,000-yard season running the football. I know he plods sometimes. He's the hammer. But now that he's got some time to just kind of rest, these two are the key to this wintry weather that's going to be coming. I think a low of 18 forecast on Saturday night. It's going to be crisp air out there. We're finally, we're turning a corner, this type of football where you need to be able to run it. And Arthur Smith's offense is built for this. The Bengals defense is not built for this. You get some successful runs, you get just a couple of dump offs that could be like some runs, and they have to start cheating up a little bit. I know Geno Stone and some of those guys on the Bengals defense have been playing better over the last few weeks, but I don't think they just match up properly with the Steelers. Offensively, they match up with anybody because it's Burrow and Chase and Higgins. Now, not having Chase Brown, that may be a factor that really hurts them, and they have to rely on just passing and pass. And if the script is the Steelers get ahead and the Bengals have to chase, the Steelers lead, that's going to benefit the Steelers. The Steelers have been playing from behind. They've had too many slow starts. They have to come out Saturday, and they have to put some drives together. They have to get 8, 9, 10 plays in 3-4 minutes, even if it's a Chris Boswell field goal that it finishes in. It helps keep that defense fresh because you just can't have 3 and out, and then a turnover as 3 of your first 4 drives and expect the defense to be able to hold. It's just, the floodgates, the dam, it's going to break open, and then all hell is going to break loose. It's a tall task. It's a tall ask. I can't talk, but we know what it's like. Because I can't sit here and just confidently tell you that they're going to smoke the Cincinnati Bengals. It's a team you should be worried about. It's just that the consequences of this game isn't as dire. You're not in a must-win to make it into the postseason. They've already secured that. But it just doesn't make you feel any better that if the Bengals come in and beat the brakes off you in your own home, and then you got to go on the road to face like the Ravens or even the Texans for that matter, who have not been playing the best of football. They've got to get right. I think they've got Tennessee, and they got to play in Tennessee, so they're going to be on the road and then host a home game. So that works out for them at least. And for the Texans side, but for the Steelers, you've got to have this momentum. You've got to come into this game and hopefully just do their job, run the football well, set up the RPO, set up the play action, find Pickens, find Austin, move the chains. Pick up yardage on first down and second down. That's been key. We know the pass protection has been kind of lousy, and the further the down in distance, obviously, the longer that Russell Wilson has to hold on to the football, and the longer he has to hold on to the football is the longer that he has to hold off somebody like Trey Hendrickson, who has 14 sacks on the season. He's the guy. There's really no one else. I mean, they have 32 sacks, which is kind of paltry when you think about it. And Hendrickson, he's been a force. As of late, he's picked up, he's been kind of hit or miss. He did have 4 sacks against the Raiders, which was his big one. But he's got 2.5 sacks. There's the math with Joe. I should bring it up. I don't have it. I have a map. This game is nationally televised, so we don't need maps with Joe or maps with Brian at this point. So anyways, folks, that's going to do it for me. Happy holidays to each fans out there. We're hoping for the best here. Thank you for tuning in, listening, watching, wherever you may be. Here we go, Steelers, 8 o'clock, ESPN/ABC. Steelers hosting the Bengals. Just the keys. Limit those turnovers. Run the freaking football. And then I think you get back to some Steelers football. You get the time of possession. You get the big plays. That 48 over under is looking spicy. I would like to see the Steelers team. They got to put up 28, 30 points on this Bengals team. I mean, they've given up so much in recent games that, I mean, it gave up. Okay. So they gave up 24 to the Broncos. Obviously, I keep throwing the Browns out because they only had 6. They gave up 27 to the Tennessee Titans. And then the Steelers, 44 before that, 34 to the Chargers, 35 to the Ravens, 24 to the Raiders, 37 to the Eagles. You want to be with the big boys? Show that you belong. This is the game to do it. You could also play spoiler and knock the Bengals completely out of this thing so you don't have to maybe see them again. I know they'd be the bottom seed. I don't think anybody wants to see Cincinnati. I know Buffalo is going to be the 2 seed. I don't think that they're salivating at the thought of hosting Joe Burrow and the Bengals in the wild card round. Not the same way that they got Man, 1 year ago, and I was thinking about this. This is the shower thoughts. This is the 2%ers, the last of our listeners still hanging on here. Thank you for hanging around one last second. This thought, the light bulb goes off. I had this thought in the shower. You know how your brain just kind of works sometimes in the morning a little differently. And I was like, man, 1 year ago, I was excited about Mason Rudolph getting this Steelers team back to the promised land on a win streak and hot into the playoffs. And you thought maybe they might have a chance against the Buffalo Bills. And then TJ Watt gets hurt against the Ravens. And you're playing with Miles Jack and Michael Walker and Eric Rowe and trying to limit Josh Allen, and you lose. This is where the narrative was with the winning seasons and everybody. Tomlin apologist. How can you not apologize for that? These are guys off the street playing defense against like a guy that's probably going to be the league's MVP this year, and was in the running for it last year too. So it looks a lot different this season. Knock on wood that these guys are still healthy. Thank you for letting me chime in right there at the end. That'll do it for me, folks. My name is Joe Kuzma. I wish all of you very well. And as I always close out the show, well, I don't always close it out this way, but I do like you to, I would prefer that you leave a rating and review wherever you might be listening or watching to the show. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm stumbling over my words. I'm out of here. Until next time, we encourage everyone out there to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.